In this heart-wrenching tale of love, loss, and unexpected connections, wealthy entrepreneur Ethan Reynolds finds himself at a crossroads after his wife's death. When a chance encounter at an orphanage brings him face-to-face with 6 remarkable sisters fighting against a world that seems determined to keep them apart, Ethan must confront his own prejudices and fears. As he navigates the challenges of connecting with these girls, particularly the fiercely protective eldest sister Amara, he discovers that sometimes the greatest acts of love require facing society's harshest judgments. But will his decision to adopt all 6 sisters bring healing or only more heartbreak? And can he prove to Amara that not everyone leaves? Stay tuned to find out. But before that, comment where you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The grandfather clock's steady ticking echoed through the empty halls of the Reynolds mansion, each sound a reminder of the solitude that had become Ethan Reynolds' constant companion. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, the 45-year-old entrepreneur watched as autumn leaves danced across his manicured lawn, their golden hues a stark contrast to the gray clouds above. Another successful quarter, Mr. Reynolds, his assistant, Sarah, announced from the doorway, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she approached with a stack of reports. The board is very pleased with the numbers. Ethan barely turned, his reflection in the window showing a man whose success had done little to fill the void in his heart. His salt and pepper hair and tailored suit spoke of wealth, but his eyes held a weariness that money couldn't cure. "Thank you, Sarah," he replied quietly, finally turning to accept the papers. His gaze drifted to the photograph on his desk. Julia, his late wife, her smile as radiant as ever, frozen in time at their favorite beach in Maui. "Is there anything else?" Sarah hesitated, then pulled out a small envelope. "Actually, yes. The children's home sent their monthly newsletter. I know you've been making donations since Julia." Ethan's fingers traced the edge of the envelope. Julia had always wanted children, but fate had other plans. Their struggles with infertility had been a private battle, one that ended abruptly with her diagnosis. Cancer took her quickly, leaving Ethan with nothing but an empire of empty rooms and hollow victories. "You know," Sarah ventured carefully, "they're always looking for volunteers. Julia used to say that giving time matters more than giving money." Ethan finished, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "She did say that, didn't she?" Later that evening, alone in his study, Ethan read through the newsletter. Photos of smiling children filled the pages, but one article caught his eye. "Volunteers needed. Be the change in a child's life." Julia's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, urging him forward. The next morning, Ethan found himself parking his Mercedes in front of Sunshine Children's Home, a modest brick building that had seen better days. Inside, he was greeted by Mrs. Thompson, the director, a warm-faced woman in her 60s who couldn't hide her surprise at seeing him in person. "Mr. Reynolds, we weren't expecting. Your donations have been so generous. But to have you here, I'd like to volunteer," he said simply, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "If you'll have me." Mrs. Thompson's face lit up, but she quickly tempered her excitement. "Of course, though I should warn you, it can be emotionally challenging. Many of our volunteers find it difficult to maintain boundaries." "I understand," Ethan replied, already building mental walls. "I'm good at keeping my distance." For the first few weeks, Ethan kept his word. He helped with homework, fixed broken toys, and even used his business connections to secure new computers for the children's study room. But he was careful never to get too close, never to learn too many names or stories. Until he saw them. It happened during lunch period. Ethan was helping serve meals when he noticed a group of 6 girls at a corner table. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10, yet she moved with the authority of a mother hen, making sure her younger sisters ate before touching her own food. "That's Amara," Mrs. Thompson said softly, noticing his attention. "And her sisters, Zuri, who's 6, 8-year-old twins Maya and Mia, 7-year-old Nina, and little Lily, who's just turned 5. They lost their mother last year. Their father." She hesitated. "He's serving time." Ethan watched as Amara carefully cut Lily's sandwich into manageable pieces. "How long have they been here?" 8 months. We've had some interest, but..." Mrs. Thompson's pause spoke volumes. "Most families aren't looking to adopt 6 children, especially..." She trailed off, But Ethan understood the unspoken truth. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found his eyes drawn to the sisters again and again. He noticed how Amara would scan every room they entered, assessing potential threats, how she positioned herself between her sisters and any approaching adults, how she never quite relaxed, even during playtime. One afternoon, he witnessed a scene that made his blood boil. A couple was touring the facility, and their reaction upon seeing the sisters was unmistakable. The woman's nose wrinkled slightly, and the man steered her away with a barely concealed look of disdain. Amara noticed too. Her shoulders stiffened, but she quickly distracted her sisters with a game. Only Ethan saw the hurt in her eyes, quickly masked by determination. When he tried to help Zuri with her math homework later that day, Amara appeared instantly at her sister's side. "We don't need your help," she said firmly, her dark eyes challenging him to argue. "Amara," Mrs. Thompson chided gently from nearby. "It's all right," Ethan said, raising his hands in surrender. "I understand," but he didn't move away entirely. Instead, he sat at a nearby table, occasionally offering quiet suggestions when he saw Zuri struggling. After a while, he noticed Amara's grip on her pencil relaxing slightly. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Ethan was fixing a broken swing in the playground when he heard sniffling behind him. Turning, he found Zuri alone, trying to wipe away tears. "Hey there," he said softly, kneeling to her level. "What's wrong?" Zuri glanced around, presumably checking for Amara, before whispering, "Why doesn't anybody want us?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Zuri continued, "The lady today said we were too much. But we're good, Mr. Ethan. We help with chores and Amara make sure we do our homework, and..." Zuri, Amara's voice cut through the air like a whip. She rushed forward, pulling her sister back. "What did I tell you about talking to strangers?" "I'm not a stranger," Ethan said quietly. "I've been here every day for weeks." "That doesn't make you family," Amara shot back, but something in her voice wavered. Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Zuri's question haunted him, mixing with memories of Julia. He remembered her dreams of a house filled with children's laughter, of Sunday morning pancakes and bedtime stories. The next morning, he marched into Mrs. Thompson's office. "I want to adopt them." Mrs. Thompson's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "I'm sorry. The sisters. All 6 of them. I want to adopt them, Mr. Reynolds." She set her cup down carefully. "While I admire your heart, this isn't something to decide impulsively. You're talking about 6 children from a completely different background." "I know it sounds crazy," he interrupted, "but I've thought about it. I have the resources, the space. These girls deserve a chance to stay together. Have you considered the challenges? The cultural differences? The media attention this would attract?" "I have now," he said with a slight smile. "And I'm still here." The news spread quickly. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Business partners questioning his judgment, family members expressing their concerns, friends suggesting he think this through. His sister Catherine was particularly vocal. "Ethan, you're not thinking clearly," she argued during an unannounced visit. "I know you miss Julia, but this isn't the answer. 6 children? And they're..." She lowered her voice, as if the empty house might judge her. "They're from a completely different world. What do you know about raising Black children?" "I know they need a home," Ethan replied firmly. "I know they need someone who won't give up on them. Everything else I can learn." The media caught wind of the story, and suddenly Ethan's private decision became public fodder. Headlines ranged from saccharine, "Millionaire's heart of gold," to suspicious, "white savior complex," or genuine care. Through it all, Ethan remained focused on the girls. The legal process was grueling. Home studies, background checks, cultural competency classes, and endless paperwork. Ethan threw himself into it all, transforming several rooms in his mansion into personalized bedrooms, hiring experts to educate him about Black hair care and cultural considerations, and even enrolling in parenting classes. Finally, after months of preparation and legal proceedings, adoption day arrived. The courthouse was packed with reporters outside, but inside, in a private chamber, Judge Martinez smiled as she signed the final papers. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "You are now legally a family." The younger girls exploded with excitement. Lily threw her arms around Ethan's legs. while the twins bounced up and down, chattering about their new rooms. Nina shyly slipped her hand into his, and even Zuri managed a genuine smile. But Amara stood slightly apart, her expression guarded. When Ethan caught her eye, she lifted her chin defiantly. "This doesn't change anything," she declared, but her voice held a slight tremor. "I'm still in charge of my sisters." Ethan knelt down to her level, aware of everyone watching. "You're right," he said softly. "This doesn't change the fact that you've been an amazing big sister. But maybe, just maybe, you could let someone help you carry the responsibility now." Amara's facade cracked slightly, her lower lip trembling before she pressed them firmly together. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away when Ethan slowly extended his hand. As they left the courthouse through a back entrance, avoiding the media circus out front, Ethan felt the weight of what he'd done settle on his shoulders. He looked at these 6 precious girls, his daughters now, and knew his life would never be the same. In the car, as they drove toward home, he caught Julia's photo and his wallet peeking out from the console. He could almost hear her laughing, see her shaking her head at his impulsive decision. But he knew, somehow, that she would have understood. Sometimes the biggest risks led to the greatest rewards. Lily's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Daddy," she tested the word carefully, making his heart skip a beat. "Can we have pizza for dinner?" Before he could respond, Amara's sharp Lily cut through the air. But Ethan saw something new in the eldest sister's eyes. Not just protection now, but perhaps a tiny spark of hope. "Pizza sounds perfect," he said, watching in the rearview mirror as 5 faces lit up with joy, while the 6th, Amara's, showed the first hint of softening. After all, every family needs its own traditions. Maybe pizza on adoption day could be ours. As they turned onto the long driveway of what would now be their home, Ethan realized that the mansion's emptiness would soon be filled with something he'd thought he'd lost forever: the sound of family. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but looking at these 6 remarkable girls, he knew it would be worth every challenge. The real journey was just beginning. The first month in the Reynolds mansion brought chaos that Ethan hadn't experienced since his most turbulent business takeovers. But unlike corporate negotiations, there was no rulebook for becoming a father to 6 girls overnight. "Maya, Mia, no running in the house," Ethan called out as the twins thundered past his study, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. A crash followed, and he closed his eyes, counting to 10 before investigating. A priceless Ming vase lay shattered on the marble floor. Maya and Mia stood frozen, their identical faces painted with guilt. Behind them, Nina clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter, while Lily peeked around the corner. "We didn't mean to," Maya started. "It was an accident," Mia finished. Ethan opened his mouth to scold them, but caught sight of Amara watching from the stairs, her expression wary, waiting to see how he'd react to her sister's mistake. He took a deep breath. "Is anyone hurt?" he asked instead. When they shook their heads, he continued, "Then that's what matters. But we need to talk about house rules." That evening, Ethan gathered everyone in the living room. "Let's make our own rules together," he suggested, setting out a large piece of paper. "What do you think is important?" "No hitting," Lily offered quietly. "Respect each other's space," Amara added firmly. "Ice cream for dinner," Maya and Mia chorused. Ethan couldn't help but laugh. Maybe we can compromise on that last one. As days turned into weeks, each girl's distinct personality emerged more clearly. Maya and Mia were the adventurers, turning every room into an expedition. Nina, the quiet artist, left drawings everywhere. Lily, still adjusting to her new environment, often sought comfort in small hiding places. Zuri threw herself into learning everything about her new home, asking endless questions. And Amara watched everything, protecting her sisters while maintaining an emotional distance from Ethan. The first major cultural clash came during morning routines. Ethan had scheduled identical morning slots for everyone to get ready, not realizing the complexity of black hair care. "Mr. Ethan," Zuri called one morning, "we need help with our hair." Ethan entered the girls' shared bathroom to find an array of products he didn't recognize. "Okay," he said with false confidence, picking up what he thought was shampoo, but turned out to be edge control. "How hard can this be?" An hour later, Lily's hair was a tangled mess. Nina was crying because the comb had gotten stuck, and even the twins had lost their usual cheerfulness. Amara stood in the doorway, shaking her head. "You're doing it all wrong," she said, finally stepping in. "You can't use that comb on dry hair. And where's the leave-in conditioner?" "The what?" Ethan asked helplessly. That afternoon, he called Sarah and asked her to schedule an appointment with a local black hairstylist. Ms. Jenkins arrived the next day, her warm smile turning to horror when she saw Ethan's attempts at braiding. "Oh, honey," she said, quickly undoing his work, "you've got a lot to learn." For the next few hours, Ms. Jenkins taught Ethan the basics, proper washing techniques, the importance of moisturizing, protective styles, and the cultural significance of hair care. When he successfully completed his first braid on Lily's hair, albeit a crooked one, the younger girls erupted in giggles. "It looks like a snake had too much to drink," Maya laughed. "A very tired snake," Mia added. Even Amara's lips twitched, though she quickly hid her smile. The next challenge came with food. Ethan's personal chef had always prepared gourmet European cuisine, but the girls pushed their plates away, missing their mother's cooking. "What foods do you like?" Ethan asked during another rejected dinner. "Mama's mac and cheese," Zuri said wistfully. "Collard greens," Nina added. "Sweet potato pie," the twins exclaimed. That weekend, Ethan dismissed his chef and brought in Mrs. Washington, a local soul food restaurant owner, to teach him cooking. The kitchen became a disaster zone as he learned to season properly. "No, child, that's not enough garlic." But slowly, he began to understand. School presented its own set of challenges. Ethan had enrolled the girls in the prestigious Riverside Academy, believing his daughters deserved the best education. But the best education came with its own problems. During the third week, Nina's teacher, Mrs. Palmer, requested a meeting. Ethan arrived to find Nina waiting outside the classroom, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Reynolds," Mrs. Palmer began, her tone condescending, "I'm concerned about Nina's performance. Perhaps she would be more comfortable in a less rigorous environment." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Ethan asked, noticing how she avoided direct eye contact with Nina. "Well, given her background, she might struggle to keep up with our standards." Ethan felt a surge of anger he hadn't experienced since his corporate days. Nina scored in the 95th percentile on her entrance exams. She reads above grade level and has a natural talent for art. "What exactly about her background concerns you?" Mrs. Palmer flushed. "I simply meant—" "I know exactly what you meant," Ethan cut in, his voice steel-wrapped in silk. "And I suggest you reconsider your assumptions about my daughter. If I hear another word about her background affecting her abilities, I'll take this to the Board of Trustees. Am I clear?" That evening, he found Amara waiting in his study. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Yes, I did. She was wrong. But you don't understand," Amara exploded. "You can't fix everything. You think because you're rich and white, you can just make all the bad things go away? You're just playing hero, and one day, when it gets too hard, you'll leave just like everyone else." The words hung in the air between them. Ethan saw years of hurt and abandonment in Amara's eyes, behind her anger. "You're right," he said quietly. "I can't fix everything. And yes, this is hard. But Amara, I'm not going anywhere. This isn't a game to me. You're my daughters now, all of you. That means something to me." "That's what they all say," she whispered, but her voice wavered. The next morning, Ethan found a crayon drawing on his desk. It showed 7 stick figures holding hands, 6 small ones and 1 tall one. "Our family" was written across the top in Zuri's careful handwriting. He had it framed immediately, hanging it prominently in his office. But not everyone was pleased with the new family arrangement. The Riverside Heights Neighborhood Association called an emergency meeting after several complaints about disruption to the community's character. "Property values are at stake," Karen Mitchell, the association president, declared. "These children are simply not a good fit for our community." Ethan stood, addressing his neighbors. "These children are my daughters. They're straight-A students, talented artists, and kind souls who share their lunch with classmates who forget theirs. If their presence threatens your property values, perhaps you should examine why that is." "Mr. Reynolds," Karen continued, "surely you understand our concerns about the changing demographics." "Actually, I don't," Ethan replied coldly. But I understand prejudice when I see it. My daughters aren't going anywhere. And if anyone has a problem with that, I remind you that I own controlling interest in the development company that holds most of your mortgages. The meeting dispersed quickly after that, but the battle had taken its toll. Ethan threw himself into work during the day and spent evenings helping with homework, attending dance recitals, and learning to cook traditional recipes. One Sunday, he surprised the girls with a soul food feast he'd practiced for weeks. The table was laden with perfectly seasoned collard greens, crispy fried chicken, mac and cheese, and sweet potato pie. "You made all this?" Zuri asked, amazed. "With a lot of help from Mrs. Washington," Ethan admitted. "I wanted to make something that reminded you of home." "It's just like Mama's," Lily whispered, taking a bite of mac and cheese. Ethan caught Amara watching him, something new in her expression. Not quite trust, but perhaps understanding. But the constant pressure began to show. Between managing his company, fighting community prejudice, and caring for 6 growing girls, Ethan barely slept. Sarah noticed his declining health first. "You need to rest," she warned. "You can't help them if you collapse." Ethan waved off her concerns, but one evening, while helping Nina with her science project, the room began to spin. The last thing he heard was Nina's frightened cry before everything went black. He woke up in the hospital to find all 6 girls cramped into his room. Lily had fallen asleep in a chair, her small hand clutching his. The twins had made get-well cards, while Nina had drawn a detailed portrait of their family. Zuri was reading aloud from his favorite book, one he'd read to her countless times. And Amara stood by the window, but for the first time, her defensive posture had softened. "The doctors say you collapsed from exhaustion," she said, meeting his eyes. "You need to take better care of yourself." "I'm fine." Ethan tried to sit up, but 6 pairs of hands pushed him back down. "No, you're not," Amara insisted. "You've been trying to do everything yourself. But that's not what families do. We help each other." Ethan felt tears prick his eyes as he looked at these 6 remarkable girls, his daughters, who had somehow become the center of his world. "Okay," he whispered. "You're right. We'll figure it out together." As he drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by the gentle breathing of his daughters who refused to leave his side, Ethan realized that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from learning to lean on others. They weren't just his responsibility anymore. They were his family, and family meant facing challenges together. In the soft hospital light, he caught Amara adjusting Lily's blanket, then checking his own foreline with careful attention. Their eyes met briefly, and though she didn't smile, something had shifted. The walls weren't down completely, but there were cracks now, small spaces where love might finally find its way through. The sterile white walls of Ethan's hospital room had slowly transformed over the course of a week. What began as a clinical space now burst with color. Nina's intricate drawings covered one wall, creating a gallery of family moments she'd captured with her artistic eye. The twins had strung paper chains across the ceiling in rainbow patterns, while Zuri and Lily had carefully placed their own artwork wherever they could reach. Cards from Ethan's employees and the children at Sunshine Home dotted every available surface, creating a tapestry of well wishes and love. But it was Amara's contribution that caught Ethan's breath. She brought in actual photographs, ones he didn't even know existed, capturing quiet moments over the past months. There he was teaching Lily to ride a bike, his hands steady on the training wheels as she wobbled down the driveway. Another showed him helping Nina with her art project, paint smudged across his expensive dress shirt, but a genuine smile on his face. In one particularly endearing shot, he was attempting to braid the twins' hair with his tongue stuck out in concentration, while both girls giggled uncontrollably. "Sarah helped me print them," Amara explained quietly one morning, adjusting a photo of Ethan reading to Zuri. Her fingers lingered on the frame, tracing the edges with unusual gentleness. "I've been taking pictures, just in case." "In case of what?" Ethan asked, though he suspected he knew. His heart already ached with the answer. Amara's hands stilled on the frame. "In case you changed your mind, so we'd have something to remember." She swallowed hard, her next words barely audible. "Everyone always leaves eventually. I wanted them to have proof that someone tried to love us, even if it didn't last." Ethan felt his heart crack open. "Come here." He patted the edge of his hospital bed, his voice rough with emotion. For once, Amara didn't resist. She perched on the edge, her usual guardedness softened by exhaustion. Dark circles under her eyes testified to sleepless nights spent organizing her sister's schedules, ensuring homework was done, coordinating with Sarah, carrying the weight of responsibility just as she had before the adoption. "I need to tell you something," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers twisted in the hospital blanket. "Thank you for trying so hard, for not giving up when the neighbors were mean, or when Mrs. Palmer was racist, or when Lily had nightmares every night for a week, for learning to cook our food and do our hair, and for wanting to understand. Most people, they don't try this hard." Tears pricked at Ethan's eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance to try." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the other girls, bursting in with their morning energy. Lily immediately climbed onto the bed, careful of the 4 lines as she'd been taught. The twins began their daily performance of the latest dance they'd choreographed, while Nina settled in the corner with her sketchbook. Zuri, ever the organizer, started arranging Ethan's get-well cards in alphabetical order. After his release from the hospital, things began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. One evening, as they all piled onto the massive couch in the family room for their newly established movie night, Lily crawled into Ethan's lap with her favorite blanket, a worn purple thing that had seen better days. "Can we watch The Princess and the Frog again, Dad?" The word hung in the air for a moment, delicate as a soap bubble. Ethan's heart swelled as he caught the other girls watching for his reaction. Maya and Mia had frozen mid-popcorn fight, while Nina's pencil stilled on her paper. Zuri held her breath, and even Amara's attention shifted from her book. "Of course we can, sweetheart," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. He wrapped his arms tighter around Lily, dropping a kiss on her head of perfectly braided cornrows, thanks to their weekly visits from Ms. Jenkins. Movie nights became their Friday tradition, complete with blanket forts, special snacks, and endless debates over film choices. Each week, a different sister got to choose the film, and Ethan made sure to include plenty of movies featuring Black protagonists and cultural stories. They created other traditions too. Sunday soul food dinners where everyone helped cook, even if the twins' contributions sometimes ended in minor kitchen disasters. Monthly visits to the Children's Museum, and holiday celebrations that blended their cultures together. The real test of their growing bond came during the school's annual talent show. The twins had choreographed an ambitious dance routine to a Beyoncé medley, while Nina had entered her artwork in the exhibition, a series of portraits capturing the diverse faces of their community. Everything was going smoothly until Ethan overheard a conversation between 2 parents near the refreshment table. "It's just so progressive of him, isn't it?" Margaret Harrison said with a smirk, her tennis bracelet catching the light as she gestured with her punch cup. "Taking in those poor inner-city children, though I worry about the influence on our other students. You know how those people... Ethan interrupted, his voice carrying across the elegant auditorium lobby. "Would you care to finish that thought, Mrs. Harrison?" The woman flushed but lifted her chin, years of social privilege hardening her spine. "Well, Mr. Reynolds, surely you understand our concerns. The cultural differences alone. The only concerning cultural difference I see," a new voice cut in, "is your outdated racism." Ethan turned to find Amara standing beside him, her eyes blazing with protective fury. She'd changed out of her dance recital costume. She'd accompanied the twins on piano, but still wore the sparkly hair clips Lily had insisted on putting in her hair. "My sisters and I have better grades than your son, Mrs. Harrison. We volunteer at the animal shelter every weekend, take dance classes, and help other kids with their homework. So what exactly are you implying about our influence?" Mrs. Harrison sputtered, her punch sloshing dangerously close to her designer blouse. "Now see here." But Amara wasn't finished. "And for the record, my dad didn't take us in like stray cats. He chose us. He fought for us. And we chose him back. So maybe instead of worrying about our influence on your children, you should worry about your influence on them." The woman hurried away, but Ethan barely noticed. He was staring at Amara, who had just called him Dad for the first time. She seemed to realize it too, her cheeks flushing, but she didn't take it back. That night, after the talent show where the twins won first place and Nina's art received special recognition, Ethan made a decision. The next morning, He called an emergency board meeting at Reynolds Enterprises. The boardroom fell silent as he stood at the head of the table, his resolution firm. "I'm stepping down as CEO," he announced to the shocked board members. "I'll retain my position as chairman, but the day-to-day operations need someone who can give them full attention. And right now, my family needs me more." His sister Catherine cornered him after the meeting, her designer heels clicking aggressively across the marble floor. "Are you sure about this, Ethan? You've built this company from the ground up. It's your legacy." Ethan smiled, thinking of 6 smiling faces. "No, Cat. My legacy is at home, probably turning the kitchen into a science experiment or redecorating the living room with crayon masterpieces." The decision to sell the mansion came next. Despite its grandeur, or perhaps because of it, it had never felt like a real home. The high ceilings echoed with emptiness. The formal rooms felt more like a museum than a family space, and the perfectly manicured gardens offered no place for tire swings or impromptu soccer games. He found a beautiful house in a diverse neighborhood, with a big backyard perfect for the girls' various activities. The rooms were full of character rather than pretense, with wide windowsills ideal for reading nooks and walls begging to be covered with family photos. "But this is your home," Zuri protested when he announced the move, her forehead wrinkled with concern. "No," Ethan corrected gently. "This was just a house. Home is wherever we're all together." The night before the move, Ethan found Amara in the kitchen, staring out the window at the garden where the younger girls were having one last tea party on the lawn. Something in her posture told him she needed to talk. "When Mom died," she began without preamble, her voice steady but her hands gripping the windowsill, "and they took Dad away. We spent 3 months in a shelter before the orphanage had space. I was so scared. Lily was only 4. She cried every night. The twins kept trying to run away to find Mom. Nina stopped talking completely. Zuri got sick, and I couldn't afford medicine." Her voice broke, and for the first time, Ethan saw her shoulders shake with sobs. He moved closer, and she didn't pull away when he wrapped his arms around her. "I had to be strong," she whispered into his shirt. "I had to protect them. No one else was going to do it. The shelter was so crowded, and some of the other kids would steal our stuff. I stayed awake at night watching over them. I braided their hair so they'd look neat for school, even though my arms got tired. I saved my lunch money to buy Zuri cough syrup. I told them stories about Mom every night so they wouldn't forget her." "You did protect them," Ethan said softly, his own tears falling into her hair. "You were so brave, Amara, but you don't have to carry that weight alone anymore. That's what parents are for." "I'm scared to let go," she admitted. "What if something happens to you too?" "I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me," Ethan said honestly. "But I can promise that I will always fight to come back to you girls. You're my family now, forever. And I've made arrangements, trust funds, guardianship plans, everything to ensure you'll always be taken care of, and most importantly, together." That night, after the girls were asleep, Ethan sat in his study and wrote a letter to Julia. "My dearest Julia, remember how you always said everything happens for a reason? I didn't believe you when you left me. Couldn't see any purpose in that pain. But now I understand. You were preparing my heart for them. 6 beautiful souls who needed love as much as I did. Thank you for showing me the way, for teaching me that family isn't about blood but about choice. Every day, I choose them, and miraculously, they're choosing me back. I wish you could see them. Nina has your artistic soul. She sees beauty in everything. The twins have your laugh, that full-body joy that can't be contained. Zuri asks the same deep questions you used to, always searching for understanding. Lily loves with your wholehearted abandon. And Amara, she has your strength, Jules, that fierce protective love that made me fall for you in the first place. I'm not the same man you left behind. I'm learning to be better, to see the world through new eyes, to fight battles I never knew existed. But I think you'd be proud of who I'm becoming. They're healing me, Jules, even as I try to heal them. Isn't that what family is supposed to do? The other day, Lily asked about you. She wanted to know if you would have loved them too. I told her you already did, that you somehow knew they were coming and made sure my heart would be ready. I keep your picture up, and the girls know all about you. Sometimes Nina draws pictures of you based on the photos, and Amara asks questions about what you were like. They're not trying to replace their mother. and I'm not trying to replace their father. We're creating something new together, something that has room for all our memories and all our love. I think I finally understand what you meant about love multiplying rather than dividing. My heart hasn't split its love between you and them. It's grown bigger, stronger, more capable of loving than I ever thought possible. You once told me that the measure of a life well lived is not in what we achieve, but in how much we love. By that measure, my love, I think I'm finally living well. Forever yours, Ethan. The following weekend, they visited Sunshine Children's Home together. The girls had asked to volunteer, wanting to show other children that happy endings were possible. They brought supplies, books, and most importantly, hope. Sometimes families look different than what you expect, Maya told a group of wide-eyed kids gathered in the playroom. But that doesn't make them any less real, Mia added, demonstrating their twin telepathy that never failed to delight younger children. Ethan watched as his daughters shared their story, as Amara held a crying little boy and told him it was okay to be scared, as Lily showed her favorite hiding spots to a shy girl, as Nina taught art to anyone who wanted to learn. The twins organized a dance class, while Zuri set up a reading corner. Mrs. Thompson found him observing from the doorway, her eyes misty. I had my doubts, she admitted, watching as Lily helped a younger child with a puzzle. But you've proved me wrong. Those girls are blooming. We all are, Ethan replied, his heart full as he watched his family spread their love to others who needed it. That evening, as they gathered for their weekly family night in their new home, Ethan proposed making it official. No matter what happens, he declared, looking at each of his daughters in turn, Sunday nights are sacred. No work, no phones, no distractions. Just us, even when we're teenagers? Zuri asked skeptically, already showing signs of preteen wisdom. Even when we're teenagers, Ethan confirmed with a smile. Even when we're in college? Nina wondered softly, looking up from her sketchbook. You'll just have to call in, Ethan smiled. We'll set up video chat. Even when we have our own families? Amara asked quietly, the question holding layers of meaning. Especially then, Ethan said firmly, because family isn't just about who's under one roof. It's about who's in your heart. And this family, he gestured to all of them, will always make room for more love. Promise, 6 voices asked in unison. Ethan looked at these miraculous girls who had transformed his life, his heart, his very understanding of love. At Lily, curled up in her favorite spot on the couch, secure in the knowledge that she was loved. At Nina, quietly capturing the moment in her sketchbook, her artist soul seeing the beauty in their unconventional family. At Maya and Mia, their endless energy, finally finding a safe place to flourish. At Zuri, her questioning mind now turned toward dreams of the future rather than fears of the past. And at Amara, her protective walls slowly transforming into bridges of trust. I promise, he said solemnly. Every Sunday, no matter what, we come together. Because that's what families do. They show up, they stay, they love without conditions. They sealed the pact with their new family tradition. 7 hands stacked on top of each other, 7 voices counting down. 3, 2, 1. Family. And in that moment, as laughter filled their new home and love filled their healing hearts, Ethan knew that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments of trust, in walls slowly crumbling, in hearts gradually opening, in the simple miracle of 6 girls and 1 man becoming something beautiful together. A family bound not by blood but by choice, by love, and by the unshakable commitment to face whatever life brought next, together. The morning sunlight filtered through the bay windows of Ethan Reynolds' study, casting a warm glow on the silver in his hair as he sat in his favorite leather armchair. At 70, his face bore the gentle marks of time and laughter, but his eyes retained the same warmth that had first opened his heart to 6 remarkable girls 2 decades ago. Spread across his lap was a well-worn photo album, its pages telling the story of an unconventional family that had defied every obstacle and expectation. His weathered fingers traced the progression of photographs, from those first tentative days of adoption to the present, where his daughters had blossomed into extraordinary women. Amara, his eldest at 30, had become one of the nation's most respected civil rights attorneys. The latest magazine on his desk featured her on the cover, standing proudly in front of the Supreme Court, where she'd just won a landmark case challenging discriminatory adoption policies. "Justice has no color," the headline read, quoting her passionate closing argument. A framed article nearby highlighted Zuri's latest gallery opening in Paris. Her paintings, celebrating Black joy and family bonds, had earned international acclaim. Critics praised her unique ability to capture emotions on canvas, though few knew that her greatest masterpiece, a simple portrait of Ethan teaching her to ride a bike, hung not in any gallery, but in their family home. The twins, Maya and Mia, now 28, had channeled their boundless energy into medicine. A recent medical journal featured their innovative pediatric clinic in underserved communities. Maya's surgical precision and Mia's psychological insight had created a holistic approach to children's health care that was being studied nationwide. Nina, always the quiet observer, had found her voice through storytelling. Her award-winning children's book series, The Rainbow Family, had revolutionized diverse representation in children's literature. The latest installment sat on Ethan's side table, dedicated to Dad, who taught me that every story deserves to be told, and Lily, his youngest at 25, who once hid from the world in closets, now commanded boardrooms. Her social enterprise, employing former foster youth, had just expanded to its 10th city. The business magazines called her a prodigy. Ethan simply called her his brave girl. The doorbell's chime interrupted his reverie. "Coming," he called out, carefully placing the album aside. His daughters had insisted on picking him up for what they claimed was a simple birthday dinner, though their recent secretive phone calls suggested otherwise. Opening the door, he found all 6 of them standing there, dressed elegantly. The years had matured their features, but he could still see traces of those little girls who had changed his life forever. "Happy birthday, Dad," they chorused, surrounding him with hugs and kisses. "You all look suspicious," he noted, eyeing their matching grins. "Can a father's daughter surprise him on his 70th? Amara asked innocently, though her eyes danced with barely contained excitement. The car ride was filled with casual conversation that felt just a bit too practiced. Ethan noticed they were taking the scenic route through familiar neighborhoods until they reached what appeared to be the local community center. Except it was transformed, glowing with elegant lights and decorations. "Surprise!" The word exploded from hundreds of voices as they entered. The room was packed with faces from every chapter of their journey. Mrs. Thompson from the orphanage, now silver-haired but still sharp-eyed. Sarah, his former assistant who'd become family. Mrs. Washington, who'd patiently taught him the art of soul food. Ms. Jenkins, who'd guided him through the intricacies of black hair care. But there were newer faces too. The twins' medical staff, Amara's law partners, Zuri's art students, Nina's young readers, and Lily's employees. 3 generations of lives touched by the Reynolds family's story. "You didn't really think we'd let your 70th birthday pass with just a quiet dinner, did you?" Zuri laughed, leading him to a seat of honor. The celebration was a masterpiece of planning, weaving together music, memories, and moments that showcased 20 years of love. Each sister had prepared a speech, and as they took turns at the microphone, Ethan felt his heart swell with pride. Nina stepped up first, her quiet voice carrying surprising strength. "When I was 12, she began, I entered my first art competition. The night before submissions were due, I wanted to quit. I was sure my work wasn't good enough. Dad sat with me all night, telling me stories about his own failures and successes in business. But what I remember most was what he said at dawn. Nina, art isn't about being good enough for others. It's about being true enough to yourself." She paused, wiping a tear. "That lesson shaped every book I've written, every story I've told. Dad taught me that my voice matters, that every voice matters." The twins approached the microphone together, their synchronized movements unchanged by time. "Remember when Dad first took us shopping for school clothes?" Maya began. "And he got so frustrated trying to tell us apart that he bought us identical outfits in different colors." Mia continued. "But we kept switching them just to confuse him," they said together, causing laughter to ripple through the crowd. Until finally, Maya smiled. "He said it didn't matter. He loved us both completely, just as we were. That unconditional acceptance," Mia added, "is what we try to give every child who comes through our clinic doors." Lily's speech brought tears to many eyes as she recalled her early days in the family. I was terrified of everything, she admitted. New places, new people, loud noises. I used to hide in closets when I felt overwhelmed. Instead of forcing me out, Dad would sit outside the door and read to me, sometimes for hours. He taught me that it's okay to be scared, but it's also okay to trust. Today, when I work with former foster youth in my company, I remember those closet conversations. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply sit with someone in their fear until they're ready to face the world. Zuri spoke of art and understanding. Most people thought my love of painting was just a phase, she said. But Dad? He converted an entire room into an art studio for my 13th birthday. He took me to galleries, museums, art supply stores. He didn't just support my dream, he helped me build the foundation to achieve it. Every time I paint, I hear his voice saying, "Show the world how you see it, sweetheart." Finally, Amara stood. The room fell silent, knowing the special significance of this moment. The once suspicious eldest daughter who had fought so hard against trusting Ethan had become his fiercest defender. 20 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I stood in a courthouse and told this man that adopting us wouldn't change anything. I was right, but not in the way I thought. It didn't change who we were at our core. Instead, it changed who we could become. She looked directly at Ethan, her professional composure softening. "Dad, you were the father I never knew I needed. You taught me that strength isn't about carrying burdens alone, but about having the courage to let others help. You showed me that love isn't fragile. It's the strongest force in the universe. Every child I fight for in court, every family I help unite, carries the legacy of your love." Then Amara smiled, that rare full smile that transformed her usually serious face. "And speaking of legacy, sisters?" The others joined her at the podium as she continued. "Dad, 20 years ago, you gave up your mansion and your CO position to focus on raising us. Today, we want to show you how that investment paid off." A large screen descended from the ceiling, showing a familiar building, Ethan's former mansion. But it was different now, renovated and renewed. "We bought it back," Zuri announced proudly, "but not for us to live in." The images changed to show renovated rooms filled with children playing, families meeting with counselors, and classrooms buzzing with activity. Gardens where therapy sessions took place, a library stocked with diverse literature, and a state-of-the-art medical clinic. "Welcome to the Reynolds Family Center," the twins said together. "A place where foster families can find support," Nina added. "Where children can feel safe," Lily continued. "And where love can bridge any gap," Amara finished. "We're creating a foundation in your name, Dad. The Ethan Reynolds Foundation for Family Unity will provide resources, support, and advocacy for foster children and adoptive families." The screen showed more images, programs already in development, families being helped, lives being changed. "Every program is inspired by our journey," Amara explained. "The hair care classes you struggled through, the cultural education you prioritized, the emotional support you provided. It's all there." Ethan couldn't speak. Tears flowed freely as he looked at his daughters. These remarkable women who had transformed from scared, hurt children into powerful forces for good in the world. The celebration continued into the night, with more surprises emerging. His grandchildren, Maya's musical prodigy son Marcus, Mia's twins Jasmine and Jordan, Nina's artistic daughter Luna, and Lily's entrepreneurial son Xavier, had prepared a special performance. Even Amara's recently adopted teenager, Sophia, who usually shied away from attention, joined in, showing how the legacy of love continued to grow. Later, when the crowds had thinned, the family gathered around a table, maintaining their Sunday tradition even on this special occasion. The grandchildren had fallen asleep in various corners, watched over by their other parents, the spouses and partners who had joined and enriched the Reynolds family over the years. "You know," Ethan said, looking at each beloved face, "when I first adopted you girls, everyone told me I was crazy. They said I was taking on too much, that it would never work. They were right about the crazy part," Maya teased. "Definitely crazy," Mia agreed. "But the best kind," Lily added. "The journey wasn't always easy," Ethan continued, "but it gave me something I never knew I was missing, a purpose bigger than myself. You girls didn't just become my daughters. You became my teachers, my inspiration, my reason for being better. Well, Amara said, reaching for his hand, you taught us a few things too, like how to trust, how to hope, how to love without limits, and how not to braid hair. Zuri laughed, breaking the emotional tension. Hey, I got better, Ethan protested, joining in the laughter. Eventually, as they shared memories and dreams around the table, Ethan felt Julia's presence stronger than ever. He could almost hear her laugh, see her nodding in approval at the family they'd become. Remember when Dad tried to make his first batch of cornbread? Nina asked, sparking another round of laughter. Or when he attempted to explain dating rules to us? Lily added. Poor Dad trying to navigate 6 different versions of teenage drama, Mia giggled. But he never gave up, Amara said softly. No matter how hard it got, the conversation turned to the future. Maya and Mia discussed expanding their clinic nationwide. Zuri revealed plans for a new series focusing on family portraits. Nina shared ideas for her next book, while Lily talked about international expansion. Amara spoke of new legal battles to fight, new families to help unite. Dad, Lily's voice brought him back to the present. What are you thinking about? Ethan looked around the table at his family, at the love that had multiplied beyond his wildest dreams, at the legacy that would continue long after he was gone. He saw not just his daughters, but the lives they touched, the changes they inspired, the future they were building. I'm thinking about miracles, he said simply, and how sometimes they come in packages of 6. The sisters exchanged glances before Amara spoke. 7, she corrected gently. The miracle was 7, you included, as laughter and love filled the room once more. Ethan Reynolds knew that while his hair might be silver and his steps slower, his heart had never been fuller. 20 years ago, he'd thought he was saving 6 little girls, but the truth was they had saved him right back. And that, he realized, was the greatest legacy of all. Not the foundation, not the community center, not even their individual successes, but the simple, profound truth that love, when given freely and accepted bravely, has the power to heal, to transform, and to create miracles that last for generations. To family, he raised his glass. To love, his daughters responded. And in that moment, as 7 hearts beat as one, the circle of their journey was complete. Though their story, like all great love stories, would live on in the lives they touched and the changes they inspired, a testament to the enduring power of choosing love, again and again, no matter what. The Reynolds Family Center would stand as a beacon of hope for generations to come. But the real legacy lived in the hearts of a father and his 6 daughters who had dared to believe that family was about more than blood. It was about the courage to love without boundaries, the strength to trust despite fear, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. As the evening drew to a close, Ethan looked once more at the family photo album, now filled with 20 years of memories. On the last page, a new photo had been added, all of them together at the center's entrance, 3 generations of the Reynolds family, their faces glowing with love and purpose. Below it, in Amara's elegant handwriting, were the words that summed up their journey. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Thank you, Dad, for teaching us that family is not about who you were born to, but who you choose to become together. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to my channel for more powerful tales of humanity, courage, and redemption. Every like, comment, and share helps spread these messages of hope and reminds us that even in our darkest moments, light can come from the most unexpected places. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, sometimes the smallest actions can create the biggest ripples in the lives of others. See you in the next story.